Okay, so this next question is from Tim O'Connor to Senator Schroeder. You've ignored contact with the Elmore County Republican Central Committee, not only after being invited to its Lincoln Day event, but also the committee's rating and vetting process. This is voted on by only elected precinct committeemen. Why should Elmore County Republicans vote for you if you won't participate or show up to events?
Thank you for the question. I first was elected to the Elmore County Republican Central Committee in 2010, then again in 2012, 2014, 2016. So I served on that committee as a precinct committeeman for 8 years. I was previously the vice chair of that county committee and legislative district 23 years. I spent a lot of time in the trenches with that committee. There used to be a rule that the Central Committee didn't endorse candidates. The purpose of a primary election was to let the Republican voters, particularly in close primary, to let the Republican voters decide who is a Republican. So amidst shouts of rhino, communist, and all this other stuff, that committee became pretty much irrelevant, particularly given the track record of picking and endorsing candidates. 100% of the candidates that they endorsed in the last election lost. So in terms of choosing how to spend my time, I spent a ton of evenings at city council meetings all across the state. From Parma on the west to Irwin and Swan Valley in the east to Fairfield and Glens Ferry, those evening meetings take up a lot of my time. Just another Thursday evening meeting, rafting futility is not something I need to spend my time on. I'll let the Republican voters of Elmore County make up their mind based on my track record, based on my voting record, based on my history and my communication with them directly as a state senator, directly as a community member. I've lived in this community for 34 years. I've been a member of the Mountain Home Lions Club for 34 years. Previously on the JCs and we ran the cheer basket. I've given and contributed to this community. I was a diehard on the city council opposing general business licensure. Nothing in my record, nothing in my voting record as a public official or as a servant indicates anything other than me being a Republican. The test of being a Republican is me winning the election in the Republican close primary.
Okay, so this next question is from Tony Orich. This is to Megan Blanksma and all candidates. Representative Blanksma, you were recently fired by the Republicans for your position as Majority Leader of the State House. Many have said it's because of your position on working against conservative budgeting and trying to oust, please mute your cell phones, please guys, to oust current Republican Speaker. If reelected, how will you work as a team pushing for conservative legislation? To everyone else, what is your plan in working within the team to push conservative legislation?
Well, I would say that there's a lot of falsehoods in that statement. So I don't know where to start as far as that. That's not what occurred. What happened was I was unwilling to be told what to do by your speaker. That's what it boiled down to. In that I want to make sure that my vote always is held accountable to District 8, first and foremost. Not to the speaker, not to anyone else. The chairman don't own my vote. The only people who own my vote are you. That's it. And when push came to shove, when I voted against what was going on, it was because it hurt District 8. That's the whole point. And that's why I did it, and I will stand up for that because it was the right thing to do. The right thing to do was to stand up to others who thought that they owned the vote for District 8, and they don't live here. We do. And so that's what happened. That's the truth of what happened. And I would continue to work with my party, and I continue to work within my party. And I'm successful, even after that happened. And if you'll go back and look, I passed multiple bills after that happened. It's not that I have lost my touch, and it's not that I can't work with the folks in my party, because we do. And what it was a large difference of opinion between the speaker and myself. And he thought that I should vote like he told me to, and I refused because I represent District 8.
Matt, you want to urge everybody to respond to the last part? your plan in working within the team to push conservative legislation?
First off, as we talked about this, I was on the budget committee, and this was the series of events that precipitated what's going on. And I think what you should be happy about is that we followed the process. When you have a disagreement in the legislature, you talk about your difference in committee. If there's a motion you don't like, you make an alternate motion. If you don't like the alternate motion, then make a substitute motion. And then you work your way through the motions. This is exactly the process that we want in place, where you have legislators who are willing to stand up for an idea and use the committee process the way that it was meant to be used. Now, once we went through the process, and once we went through the motions and the alternate motions, and it came to the floor, well, there's usually one side that wins and one side that doesn't. That's where it should end. When you use the process in place and you take the votes, and the vote says we're going to go path A and not path B, then you go path A and you move on. But, as she said, there were some hard feelings, and then people were supposed to say, all right, path A won through the committee process. We are now going to punish somebody. That's what happened. And unfortunately, Representative Blanksville was the person that was punished. I was a part of this. I was a part of using the process put in place for motions and alternate motions. And when it came out, and when we finished it up, we had a process. It should have ended there. That's what and so if you guys are true Republicans, which I believe we all are, we use a process. We use the committees, we take a vote, and whichever way the vote goes, we proceed. That's how you do a conservative budget. That's how you do conservative legislation. And that's how you be a Republican and a conservative, is you follow the process in place.
As I said when I did my introduction, I have spent a lot of time with the legislature, building relationships with other conservative legislators. And because I don't have elected experience, I felt that was very important for me to do, so that I would have a group of people that I could go to, and when there was a question, when there was a concern about a certain bill. The process isn't a problem for me at all. I just want to make sure that that team works well together. So I do have those relationships. When you receive a vote of no confidence from your peers, I think that's very telling as to where people really feel about what's been going on. So it was unfortunate that it happened, but it did happen. And so I think it's something that, it's a good way to tell the temperature of how our district is feeling about our current legislation, or legislators. Thank you.
So my plan is working with the team to push conservative legislation. Because I've got 6 years of experience in the Idaho legislature, and I can tell you one thing for sure. Is that better?
Yes.
I have such a trouble, I feel like I'm going to swallow it. Anyway, I've served six years in the Idaho legislature, and one thing that I can tell you is it's very, very, very difficult to maintain a conservative level of performance. You get in there, you become friends with the lobbyists, you want things done, so you start thinking, well, maybe if I vote for this, I'm going to vote for that. And you can really get caught up in it. But the one thing that I always remember, and it reflects in my voting record, because I have 6 years of a consistent, very conservative voting record on multiple platforms. Not only that, but if you look at the fundraising that's taken place in our campaign, our fundraising doesn't come from big businesses. Our fundraising comes from people like you in this audience, $50 and $100 and $200 at a time. I work with the people. When we did constitutional carry, it were the phone calls and the emails and the text messages from the members of the state of Idaho, the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, that contacted their legislatures and said that's what they want. I am on your team. Yes, I work with the legislators. I work well with them. I have my Democrat friends in the legislature come and say to me, I know we don't always agree on everything on principle, but you're a really nice person and you're good to work with and we can find common ground. I work good with the representatives that are Republican in the legislature. We don't always agree, we don't see eye to eye, because I want done what you want done. I don't vote thinking about the next election. I vote thinking about what serves the people that I serve, and how should I best vote, and what should I do to make that happen for them. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's see. Work with a team to push conservative legislation. Yeah, I've been doing that, I think. There's some legislation, I guess, it all gets wound up into a term that's inherently vague. What is conservative? Is it conservative enough? There's a spectrum. There's some people that nothing's ever conservative enough. But I can tell you that I work with people with whom I don't necessarily agree. Representative Scott and I are pretty much far apart on a lot of issues. He brought a bill that would strip state sales tax revenue funding from cities that fail to enforce felons. So people saw this as revenge against Boise for saying they weren't going to enforce the abortion ban. So he crafted that bill, they renamed it so it was any felony. I got with Representative Scott because he and I go way back. We first met at U of I in 1984. And I said, there's a couple concerns here about a city that gets into a contract with another law enforcement agency and they split the duties about how to enforce felonies. Maybe we should tweak this wording. He agreed with me. We amended the bill, and the bill passed, and it's law today. There are other bills that I disagreed with, that I worked with the sponsors, even though I disagreed with them, and I helped advance conservative legislation. The bill that was required the putting of endowment trust in public schools. I helped the sponsor amend that to make it so that the school could pick the size and placement of that sign, so that there wouldn't be litigation over who bought it. I don't think that is necessary. I don't think it's necessary legislation. I ultimately voted against it, but I helped advance it. I didn't try to kill it. I tried to make it less harmful. It's that set of eyes and knowing what people want and trying to make the two merge the best I possibly can. I have a great deal of experience doing that. I'm able to work with my colleagues in the House. Thank you.
Question, because in base culture, if you're on Facebook and you say the wrong thing, you're gonna get unfriended, you're gonna get canceled, right? That's the thing we talk about today, like a very sort of immature level across society of working together. But if you're gonna get something done in the legislature, you're gonna need 36 votes or so in the House, depending who's there, and like 16 votes in the Senate, right? You're gonna need enough votes to get done to build coalitions, you're gonna work with people, you're gonna find where you agree on certain things, where on others, and to be able to set aside one bill you don't agree on, one bill you do. You work here but not there, and all that kind of stuff. So that's definitely an important legislative process. Legislators are part of committees and this. There's all kinds of angles here. We have to work together, be professional, and kind of overcome our differences on different things. But find the people who agree with us and advance that issue here. And I just enjoy being out here with you guys, and door knocking and meet and greets with you guys, and talking to you about. There's so many things down here. You guys. Impart your knowledge in so I can take that back and help represent you. Because, one person never can know everything in a district like this. Like we said, this district is enormous. You have to chalice and what, 3-4 hours away from here, you got McCall, a huge drive up to there and back. There's so many different things here. We've got to be constantly learning, constantly adapting, and improving what we're doing here. So that's the kind of thing I want to do is keep learning from you guys, keep hearing from you so we can do a great job in the legislature, advancing it, finding other people who also agree in the legislature to do it that way. So we're just acting professionally, not calling names. We talked about before this, here we're going to have professional discussions and just talk about the issues and do the best we can up there.
Okay, so this next next question is for all the candidates, so Faye, you'll be the first one to answer. So this question comes from Scott Hardejohn. Our public schools are critical community infrastructure. Here at Mountain Home, with the exception of one building, all of the active public schools were built in the early 60s. Many communities in District 8 suffered the same or worse. Since 2005, the Idaho Supreme Court ruling concluded that, quote, the system of school facilities funding established by the legislature was insufficient to meet the constitutional requirements because the reliance on loans alone to pay for major repairs or the replacement of unsafe school buildings was inadequate for poor school districts. Will you actively introduce legislation next session to adopt new mechanics of school facilities funding besides the existing supermajority vote required to pass a bond? And if so, explain specifically what those concepts may be.
I remember when my father was the school maintenance supervisor for the Call Valley School District for many years, and they were in that same situation. The school had been built back in, I think it was 1963 or something like that, and it was being held together with baling twine and plumber's tape. And he always complained about that, and always, every day, he had to go and fix the boiler. But back then, we had a different funding system for the schools where, like in our area, we had logging and mining was more prevalent. And we would receive millions of dollars because those logging companies actually would pay towards the infrastructure of the school districts. But then when Clinton shut logging down back in the 1980s, we lost that. And so now we're still, I think, struggling to try and find the right formula, the right way to do this. I know the governor in his State of the State address this year pledged a couple of $1 billion, I believe, over the next 10 years to work towards that. But we need to find a way to make this sustainable. And what that formula is, we do need to find that. I had someone asking me a couple of nights ago that we do need to take care of these rural schools. So when I get in there, I will have a few more tools to work with and more information. But that is my history of how schools used to be funded with the forest, the logging. And so if we could get back to that, that would be a huge help. And but that's another issue. Thank you.
So obviously logging dollars matter north of here, and that's great, but we also have to address the problem down here in southern Idaho, and this is what makes our district so diverse, is there are lots of interests. This year, the governor and many others worked on a bill, and I was part of the initial negotiations. Didn't get quite what I thought we needed, particularly for rural schools, because what they did was average daily attendance. And my argument was to keep the lights on in a school building, there's a baseline, right? It's just like in your house. So, if you have kids in your house when they're in high school, when they leave to go to college, you still have to run the refrigerator, you're still gonna, run the stove, you're still gonna make sure the lights work in their bedrooms for when they come home, and you're still gonna run the air conditioning and the heat, right? There's a baseline. And the current facilities bill doesn't address that. And in fact, Mountain Home, of all of the schools that receive money through that distribution, Mountain Home gets 14 to 15 million, and it's the only school in this legislative district that gets enough money to actually do anything with. And I had argued in the initial phases of the bill that we needed to have some sort of cap, because West Ada School District, one of the wealthiest school districts we have in the state, gets $150 million. And I had argued that what we need to do is cap and make sure that we can push some of that money down to rural school districts to help them survive and help get the baseline of lights on. Because out here, we all know, that's great because you can homeschool your kid, but you don't have charter schools as options. You don't have private schools as options. And we rely on our rural schools for our communities. That's what brings us all together, is the football games and the basketball games, and your kids all know each other because they all go to school together. And we need to fight for that. And that's what I say. It's important to have a really strong voice in the legislature because the Treasure Valley overwhelmingly outnumbers us in the legislature. And so that's what I've been working on.
The education thing in Idaho is a tough deal, and that's one thing that as I've been campaigning around our legislative district and phone calls from people all over the state, this is a big concern for people right now. I think part of the problem that we have is our education funding is very top heavy. We have millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars that go into administrative costs. You talk to any teacher that's worked out their salt, and they will tell you that money needs to get to a classroom. We need to get that money to our kids, to our good teachers, into our buildings. Do I have the answers on how that should be funded right now? No, I don't. Am I willing to dig into it and figure it out and find out how to cure it? You bet I am. I'm a former school board member. I've got 5 kids, 4 of them were public education and 1 of them was homeschool. I had 11 grandkids. Not only that, I have 2 developmentally disabled grandchildren. And I watched their parents fight for their rights. You can't even imagine what it's like. Every child is different. The needs of every child is different. We can't put them in, this is what a lady said to me at Wilderness Ranch yesterday. Actually, she was coming after me to get after me about someone they told her I didn't support education. When she left, we were hugging, we were on the same page, because we don't want our children boxed. We want every child to be able to learn the way that he learns best. We want that money in our classrooms. We want that money in our buildings. We want that money to count for our kids. And I am more than willing to sit down with anybody and figure out how the best way to make that happen is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We want one. Okay, then.
Oh, all right. Okay, I believe general uniform and thorough system of free common public schools is the last sentence in what it's our duty as legislators to do. I think the uniformity program, part of it is violated, and the court has held so, because it ends up being a function of the bonding capacity of the county or the district in which the school resides. And that's unfortunate, but schools like Cameron, but schools like Chalice and Boise County schools are very disadvantaged in what they can do for getting a building. So because it's the duty of the legislature to fund this, I believe it should be statewide funded. That is, all the facilities and all the maintenance of those facilities should be done by the state. That's a big lift. That's a lot more than this bill that we passed. I agree with Representative Blangston's attempt to negotiate. In fact, I voted for trailer bills that would have put a cap and a floor on the amount that the school district could receive under this. But I think this is a step in the right direction. Will I actively try to introduce legislation to do that? I will have to. I will have to try to, but I'm working with my colleagues to see what that would look like. I'm getting positive responses from a great deal of them, but that's going to take a sea change in how we allocate our statewide budgets. It's going to be difficult, but I think it's something that's important that we need to do. I'm a former teacher. I started the Mountain Home Military Science years and she retired. I have a granddaughter in grade school right now. This is very important, very near and dear to my heart. It's one of the most important things we do is provide education to our youth. It's a public good, and it's a constitutional duty. You can't do it if you're always having to empty buckets of water from the leaking roof. And so I think the state should fund it and alleviate us from having to pass bonds to begin with. And so that's what I'm going to try to advocate.
It's a great question. It's a big question. It's all over the district here. Idaho City, there we go. The same kind of questions. And then, Ward Creek, all this stuff. The Idaho City schools, they're not really up to par. Well, our business back in Indiana, we went into schools and helped teachers work with their kids with autism and other developmental disabilities. And if you have a leaky roof, like you were saying, like you're gonna get mold. You're gonna have health hazards to the kids, the teachers, if we're gonna get sick. We gotta have a, a basic standard that people can expect to come to school, have the, drafty windows or mold and those kinds of health issues. We've gotta find a way to do that. But at the same time, we all know, like, we're taxed so heavy federally, that even when someone comes across and says, hey, I need more money for school, what's our reaction? We're like, right? Please, no, not another tax increase. We're already $34 trillion in debt. We can't even pay the bills we have now. And so that's a real huge issue. So yeah, it's gonna take a whole overhaul of the way we think about it. We've gotta get these buildings fixed, and maybe we don't fund things like the launch program, we fund things in the school buildings here. So I think that are some things in the state funding we look at to ensure these schools are funded without increasing taxes on the hardworking people, especially, Boise County, down here, not the wealthiest counties out here if you look around. There's not tech billionaires sitting here just feeding into the system here. A lot of second homes, a lot of people don't even live in these counties here. They're second home vacation homes. So it's a little different atmosphere. We've got to find a way to get school buildings, safe and effective programs.
Well, I've spent the past 20 years of my life dedicated to public schools. And the thing about public schools right now is, when I was a baseball coach, we incorporated all kinds of students. I had homeschool kids come play for me. I have homeschool kids want to come take my government class. So those are good things that we have where we are including a lot of this. Now, 521 this year and 292 last year are bills that are allowing the state to help us lower our property taxes through some bond and levy repayment plans. 521 is getting out, as we've already heard, 521 is getting money out to the districts for facilities. So it's a lump sum here, and then for Mountain Home it's about another $800 to $1 million for the next 10 years. But here's the thing, and this is what we've alluded to, we have started the process. 521 has given us a start for the state to start to take responsibility for these facilities throughout the state. And I was on the negotiating team, but we had it set with a cap and a base. And then we lost the cap and the base because of the Ada County legislators. There's more of them than there are us. So you've got a trio here that are lifting our weight. I mean, the amount of bills I've been able to carry, we'll talk about it later on, but we have started the process. And I think if we continue this process, we're going to get it so that the state will take a bigger portion and a bigger part so that we can have the facilities and the funds that we need. If you look at Mountain Home, we're using a building that's 100 years old. And if you want to keep a 100-year-old building up to code, you have to get that money from the money that should go to the classroom. I agree. The students are our primary focus. These are the things that I've dedicated my life to for 20 years when I do on the budget committee, where I am one of the primary folks in determining the education budget as well as other budgets that pertain to the things that we need the government of Idaho to do for our citizens.
Okay, so the next question is from all candidates. Megan, you'll be the first one to answer. So this is from Reginald Pierce. Do you think Idaho acted appropriately with COVID lockdowns, mask mandates, forced vaccinations, and deeming who is essential and non-essential employees on who can work or not work? Please explain.
Yeah, I'm the only one who voted against mask mandates that's up here. I sat on Central District Health. I was the lone vote, the only vote that said no mask mandates. I was it. I stood alone. And that's because I believe that the decisions need to be made locally and not through the public health district. So I was never a part of that, and yes, I did oppose it. And when it came around to legislation that talked about the governor's powers and what he could do for emergencies, I was part of the group that wanted to limit that because he was overreaching, we thought, what his powers should be. Because a lot of the powers that he was claiming were based upon 1950s, 60s, and they were assuming there was going to be something like nuclear war. So, and instead he was using those to apply to a pandemic. And so, yeah, we addressed that. So I can honestly say, on all of those things, that I've already been there. I have a record of it. Additionally, I have a record of opposing IRIS, and I don't know if all of you know what IRIS is. It's the immunization reporting system in the state of Idaho. And I have repeatedly run legislation, and it usually dies in the Senate, like we did again this year, but that opposes the fact that it's an auto opt-in. So you might not realize it, but every time you go get a vaccination, it's reported to the state of Idaho. You have to know to opt out of that system. And I found out when my kids were teenagers, because I had opted them out and I was keeping track of their records personally. And then that's when I found out that the state was keeping track, even though I had never opted into the system. So I continue to fight for that to make sure that you control your medical records. And if you want the state to have them, great. That's up to you, but it should be up to you. It should not be up to the state.
Okay, so do I think that the COVID situation was handled appropriately by leaders in the state of Idaho? No, I don't. I mean, Idaho was the first state in the United States that the governor told the Board of Pharmacy that they couldn't prescribe hydroxychloroquine. I don't think that was right. Idaho was one of the first states in the country where small businesses were shut down. Idaho was one of the first states in the country where clergy were arrested for holding church in a public parking lot. Was it handled correctly? No. All you had to do, and I was in the house when it started, all you had to do was answer the phone when it rang in the middle of the night and talk to people about their loved ones dying in nursing homes from loneliness. All you had to do was take the phone calls from the nursing home and care facility owners and their sadness and frustration and helplessness as they had to watch their clients die from loneliness because their families couldn't come and visit. Do I think that should ever happen again? No. I was one of 15 legislators that showed up to call for a special session to end the emergency. The emergency continued far longer in the state of Idaho than it had to because we got federal money.
Yeah.
And even in my last year in the Senate, I probably will hear about this, any bill, no matter what that funding was for, that contained COVID relief money, I voted against. Because those dollars can be spent. You accept that money, whether it's funding to law enforcement, funding to schools, funding to whatever, there are government strings attached to it, and you will do as they say once you get that money. And I will never indenture the citizens of the state of Idaho for any reason to the federal government over an emergency that basically ruined our country.
So, you had a lot of conflicting information. You had a president who was getting advice from his advisors, who was advising the governors on what to do. You had a president contradicting his own advisors when it started to look bad. You had governors trying to rely on their staffs who were getting conflicting information from the president's advisors and the health departments. So a ton of mistakes were made. That much we can be sure of. Did it need to go on as long? I don't know. But I'll tell you this. We don't know what another pandemic could look like. We were trying to go back, and I did, look at the history, the newspapers from the 1918, 1917 pandemic that hit Idaho, and the steps that health boards took then. The existence of health boards predates our state. The danger of communicable diseases is real and has been recognized by the territorial legislature. And so to sit here and legislatively close the door and say you shall not do these things that may in fact protect health, that may be necessary to protect health. Something as dangerous as Ebola. There are dangerous diseases out there. We don't know when the new one is going to come. Were mistakes made this time? Absolutely. Should we have done it the way we did? Probably not. But to sit here and say we're going to pass legislation that forever bars X, Y, or Z without knowing what the future holds is irresponsible.
Were there mistakes made in the pandemic? You bet they were. It should never, ever happen again here. We should have learned our lesson, right? They tried, it took us 2 weeks. 2 weeks is all they needed to flatten the curve. And what most of us got through is go, well, maybe give 2 weeks. Maybe this is so bad, give 2 weeks. And it was 30 days. Now you need to wear a mask. Now you need to wear asking scuba gear on your face to prevent you from doing it. Maybe you're gonna shut down the airlines, right? It went on and on. Now you're gonna wait for the vaccine. The vaccine might prevent it, but it might not. Get 2 just in case. Make sure your neighbor gets it too, because your vaccine won't work because your neighbor gets their vaccine, right? On and on and on. For 2 years, Idaho was in a state of emergency over COVID. I mean, it was wrong. You know, we had mask mandates that employers willing to fire their employees if they refused to take an experimental COVID jab. It was just plain wrong. No employer should have the right to your medical records, especially in regards to experimental medication that's being rammed through in an emergency. I mean, what do you think is going to happen when we do things in emergency? Things are not going to be done as they should be. And we've seen it. I mean, people are being sick. People are dying. You have athletes literally dropping dead on the field over this COVID shot. And yet Idaho has refused to protect employees who don't want to be fired from their jobs over the COVID shot. So we got to make some big changes and never let this happen again.
Like I said earlier, when the 2019-2020 COVID hit, I was in Mountain Home City Council. We did not implement any mask mandates. None. So I didn't vote for them. I didn't support them. The reason we didn't put them in is because nobody on the council supported them. Why would we do it if we know it's the wrong thing to do? It was the wrong thing to do. Do we think that the governor made some mistakes? You bet. Now, I wasn't in the legislature for the special session. I wasn't there. But when I did come in, I did support and I did vote for the limitations of the governor's powers when it came to these emergencies. So my voting history is I have never voted for a government mask mandate. I have never voted for a government mandated vaccine. But I have reacted to overreach by the executive department as we did in the legislature. So my record stands for itself. I can tell you what I would have done or maybe would have done, but I can tell you what I actually did. And I supported local government, I supported your choice, and I never, ever voted for a government mandated mask mandate. Thank you.
Well, I have to agree with almost everything that was said here today on this subject. I would never vote to have a mask mandate or forced vaccinations. Actually, they were shots, not vaccinations. They were totally experimental. Our governor made the biggest mistake by not having any elected officials on his advisory committee. He had the health board, he had AARP, and one other, but none of them were elected officials. He wouldn't even consult with the lieutenant governor, which at that time, they did not get along at all, and which was very detrimental to our whole state. But he could have brought in other elected officials, the attorney general. He just did not do that. But I will promise you that I would not sign or introduce anything or agree with any bill that would place these kinds of mandates on us. I never had the shot, I never wore a mask, and I never got COVID. And I got yelled at a lot. I got kicked out of some places, asked to leave because I was talking too long one time. But no, I have my rights, and I stood by them. So that won't happen again in this state.
Okay, so the next question is for Representative Nikki Blanksmith. This question comes from Danny R. Bond, Precinct Committeeman. In 2019, you sponsored a bill creating a needle exchange program for drug addicts. There was multiple warnings and debate that this would create an outlet for drug addicts to get materials to use drugs. This allowed the Idaho Harm Reduction Project not only to pass out needles, but included snorting kits, bubble pipes used for meth, and heroin pipes to those in Idaho. Why did you support this legislation and sponsor it? And to other candidates, do you think the taxpayer money should be spent on this? Why or why not?
Okay, first of all, again, a lot of inaccuracies in there. The initial piece of legislation, the target of it was a one-to-one exchange to make sure that there weren't needles, there weren't extra needles places, and there was a requirement that anybody who came and wanted to be a part of any needle exchange, there were not taxpayer dollars directed to it ever. It's in the original legislation. Additionally, there was a requirement that if someone did come, it was a way to get them to treatment. So what the Idaho Harm Reduction Project did was completely outside the law. They were 100% in violation of the law. They never complied with it, they chose not to comply with it, and all of those situations were because they were operating outside of the law. That's important to remember. And once we found out that that was going on, guess what we did this year? We killed it. We took it away. And I was on board, I spoke on the House floor to remove the program. Because if you're gonna abuse something like that, then you don't get to use it. And it is one of those situations that seems to happen with the Department of Health and Welfare time and time again, of you'll have something that you want to use for good use, which is getting people who need help, and they will pervert it into whatever system they want it to be. And that's what happened with that system. They perverted what had the potential to get people some serious help into something that they wanted it to be and created a very serious problem. And that's why I voted to kill the program this year.
Thank you. I voted against it. When that bill came up in the legislature, I looked at it, I read it, I consulted with people who were far more knowledgeable about the situation than I was. You could see from the very beginning that it was just not something that was going to be beneficial. After the bill passed, and I went to the website and I saw that the program, and this was in, the bill passed in 19, I think it went into effect. Did it have emergency clause? No, so July the first year. But then after the program started, I went to the website to see what actually happened with it. And I was really surprised to find out that you could go there and pick up just about everything you needed to be a successful drug user. You could get your own color-coded cooker so your cooker didn't get mixed up with the other drug users that you were hanging out with. You could get your sexually transmitted disease test and medication and stuff. And I'm thinking, why is this being funded? I mean, I know we need to help people. I know that we need to help those who hurt. I know we need to help those who are in the throes of addiction. But there's got to be a better way than facilitating and supporting that addiction and the tools to make it happen. That's where families, strong families come in. That's where our churches come in. That's where our community should pick up. I don't believe it's the proper role of government to provide a program like that. I didn't vote for it then, and I wouldn't vote for it again.
Thank you. The state law, federal law makes these substances illegal. There are felonies for possession of these substances: heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl. Very dangerous. These people are very addicted. It's almost as addictive as nicotine. So there's very little that some of these people can do about the addiction that they have. And I deal with it in court all the time. I deal with meth DUIs and other drug DUIs, where people are addicted. And one thing I hate to see as a prosecutor is I get an email. You need to dismiss this case because the defendant died. The defendant passed away. And here you have this perfectly happy-go-lucky person that got mixed up with these criminals with fentanyl. And they're dead at the floor on the floor of their trailer because they're using fentanyl. And it's just awful, because I had this girl on a barking dog case, and we were going to work together and get it fixed. And the next thing I know, I have to dismiss it because she's dead. So the object behind this needle exchange program is well motivated. But it only took me 10 seconds to watch the video of that harm reduction project literally admitting to violating the law and creating far worse circumstances for people. And I 100% support Megan's effort and the effort of the legislature to get rid of that. Those people went way, way far afield. That's one of the things I do, is work with defendants in these cases to get them the counseling that they need to supervised or unsupervised probation. And so the idea that a person can get a needle that isn't going to kill them, I think, really skirts that line. But saving somebody's life is the most important part here. That's what we're trying to do. And get them the counseling that they need to get off of this horrible, deadly addiction.
Well, for better or for worse, I really, drugs have not been a part of my life. My family's been able to keep, my family's, away from that. So it's definitely not an expertise on this. It seems like, kind of a bad idea intuitively. Now, I guess I just sort of rhetorically here, I don't understand if the program was written correctly and just ran improperly. Why wouldn't you just put new people in there to run it properly? I don't know. But this is kind of the trick with government programs. Like, the government's, notoriously inefficient. Like the military, you tell them to go conquer Baghdad, we can do it, right? We just kind of throw everything we have at it. But you get other things there, it takes lots of oversight and all these things the government's not as good at. So we really have to make sure the government's focusing on the things it really needs to be doing, the really essential services, necessary services, things that are supported by our state constitution, and really dialing on those things. I don't know, this doesn't really seem like to me, this is something I'd be spending my money on. I think there's a lot of other things we've been talking about here already, whether it's schools or transportation or waterways. Maybe spend a little more time there and try and find some help from these people, from experts, outside maybe the government, who could help along the way.
This law went into effect before I went to the legislature. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you couldn't hear me. I apologize.
She can't see, so she's
Oh.
asking who's there.
Oh, how are you? My name's Matt Bunyan. Good to meet you. So, I was not in the legislature when this took effect, but I do think that Mr. Vice Mayor will be happy to know that when we did track down who was responsible for these violations and not running the program, they no longer work for the state of Idaho. So that is something that we very, very closely look at is when we put a program in. And this happened after I was, there was a lot of replacements made and a lot of corrections done. So I think we're going to all agree that if somebody messes up the program that bad, they should really go find a new career, and they did. And I did support repealing the program, so that's pretty easy to see where I stand on this. Thank you.
The subject of addiction really hits me very personally. My father was an alcoholic and he died from drinking. My daughter just 3 years ago got out of prison for meth possession and selling. She spent some time in prison. And the only thing that got her clean and sober, and she still is to this day, praise God, was going to prison. She had no choice. She was 6 months in Ada County Jail and then a year in the state penitentiary. And she never wants to go back, and so she's working very hard to do this. The unfortunate thing is that she was living on the streets and doing drugs during the time that this project was in force. And she said that the people around here thought it was awesome because they could go get fresh needles. They had no interest whatsoever in getting any counseling or getting any help. None of them did. And there was such a, I believe I heard 6 out of the period of time that actually did go into treatment that were recommended, and it was like 900 that actually took part in the project. So those are very sad odds. Very, very happy that this project was repealed this year. It was necessary to repeal it, but it was unfortunate that we had to go through this to find out what was really going on within that project. So I hope nobody else goes through that. But there again, my daughter is clean and sober. I was never going to tell anybody about that, but under the circumstances, it made sense to let people know that. And I'm very proud of the work that she is doing.
Okay, so the next question is for all candidates. Christy, you'll be the first one to answer. This question comes from Patty Stats. Do you support Idaho's current law on abortion? Would you vote to make abortion more accessible in Idaho than what is already currently in law?
The abortion question, again, like I stated before, is very near and dear to my heart because I worked on abortion legislation the whole time I was in the legislature in one form or another. I know I'm trying to get it closer, and I guess I need to talk louder too. So I support our law the way it is now. Would I like to see it stronger? Yes, I would. I believe that life begins at the moment of conception. I hear the terms a woman's choice. What about that baby that's being carried in that womb of that woman? What choice does she have if her life is ended? What choice will that little boy have if his life is ended? God created those babies. They don't grow if there's not life at that moment of conception. What about rape? I have friends who are the product of rape. And they are very, very, very glad that they were not aborted. And I find it interesting that the people that support abortion are allowed to talk about it. That's an interesting concept to me. So yes, I would like to see every child conceived protected. I would like to see every baby live to feel the wind in their face and the sun on their back, to be able to grow and live and love and enjoy the life that every person in this room here today has been able to enjoy.
Thank you. We've seen a great deal of concern from our medical community about the existence of exceptions or affirmative defenses on Idaho's abortion law. And I believe it needs to be amended, and it needs to be changed to be more clear that a doctor can protect the life and the health of the mother in the case of complications in pregnancies. It's not clear right now because the Attorney General decided to write a letter to a legislator that was then shared that said that doctors in Idaho could face the threat of prosecution if they refer a woman out of state to get an abortion that she can't get here. Now, these abortions are for medical reasons, for the health of the mother. But Idaho's exceptions, and Representative Blanksman will have a lot more to say on this because she helped rewrite it so that we could get closer to where we need to be. But Idaho's Attorney General has turned this litigation into more questions and more problems for Idaho's doctors, and has put us in the doctor's office between a patient and the doctor, where we don't belong. That doctor knows what is best for the health of the mother and ultimately the health of the child. Whether she can have another child or not is being dictated by a legislative fiat and chaos created by the Attorney General's letter that threatens doctors with prosecution if they send a woman to where they can get the care that doctor, using his medical degree, believes that they need. So, I support continuing exceptions for rape and incest, and I believe that this law needs to be cleaned up, and our Attorney General needs to clarify his stance on not prosecuting doctors for getting women the health care that they need from their doctors.
Well, all human life is precious, and I do support, Idaho's law as is. If there's technical things to fix, okay, but really it should be, what the half the problem with the abortion debate anywhere you see it in the country is, the left wants to come in here and bring up some rare circumstance, the 1 in a million case, and make as if that's really what abortion is about. Abortion is really a lot of times, it's about, just contraceptions. It's sad that, that's where we are, but that's a lot, it's almost all of it. And in very rare circumstances, I've talked to OB/GYN doctors throughout my life, and they said the amount of instances where there's the actual life of the mother at stake and the babies or something like that is extremely rare. They've delivered hundreds of babies. It almost never comes up. So the truth is, in really the most rare circumstances, we do need to encourage, culture of life, we need to respect life. All human life is sacred. It comes from God, if I can say that still these days. But yeah, that's my stance on it. I would support, the law as is.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this. I have, in my opinion, the 3 most beautiful children in the world and the 6 most wonderful grandchildren in the world, 2 of them which are in the womb and on their way. I will say that I supported, and I support the trigger law that was put in place by Representative Blakeman. I support that law. And to let you know exactly where I am on this issue, I am endorsed by Idaho Right to Life. Thank you.
Hands down, life begins at conception, and there's proof to that. And to destroy that life is a horrible thing. There is no right to that. The current law is okay, but I'd like to see life begins at conception. I know that'll probably never happen. But one of the most beautiful experiences I ever had was placing my first grandchild in the arms of his adopted mom. And as hard as it was, we had to grieve that loss, even though he's still alive. He's 26 years old now, and we have no idea where he is or where he lives, what he's doing for his life, or even if I'm a great-grandpa. I have no idea, because he is old enough. But adoption is the best choice. It is a beautiful choice, and I will never say anything different than that. So there is a choice. Rape, incest pregnancies are extremely rare. And like Rob said, and medical necessity for abortion is extremely rare. We shouldn't even have to have that conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was the House sponsor for the trigger bill that exists in Idaho state law today. Yeah, I ran it, I negotiated it, and we made sure that it was ready to go for when the Dobbs decision came down. After the Dobbs decision, we made an adjustment on it, and that was in particular with regard to being able to, if you had a report for rape or incest, because you had to have a report to do that if you were going to go down the abortion lane, to make sure that you had access to that report as quickly as possible, so that people couldn't withhold reporting from you. The other thing we made sure to outline, because again, the left tends to scream and be a little bit over the top on we've all heard the terrible comments about what they think are happening to women. So we cleaned up some of the language to make sure that a non-viable pregnancy, so this is if you can't, a truly non-viable, so there's like an ectopic pregnancy which won't survive. If the woman's no longer pregnant, that was a definition we put in because the state of Idaho has a definition for what pregnant means. And so we tried to make it as clear as possible, and the primary reason we did that was because doctors were getting scared by the rhetoric. And that's the problem that we've had, is that doctors are frightened by the rhetoric, they want rules, they want consistency, and they want to know what they can do and what they can't do, and that has been part of the problem. And Senator Schroeder alluded to some of it as far as letters back and forth between various attorneys, and that's been the thing that we've tried to address, to make sure that the law is clear. And I stand by what we've run. I think we have a solid law here in the state of Idaho. It's like everything else, there's always something else that'll come up, and yeah, there'll be a rarity or something that might need to be addressed, but the problem is trying to figure out how to best address those without losing the primary function of the law.
Okay, so this is going to be the last question of the evening. So we have about 14 other questions. What we're going to do is we're going to scan these in and email them to all the candidates. If they choose to respond to them, we'll put them on our social media page, and along with the Mountain Home News, and they'll put it in the newspaper for everybody to read the responses. So we try to get through as many as possible, but unfortunately, just really good questions tonight. So this one's going to be for all candidates, but Representative Bundy, I'm going to let you answer this first because your name's mentioned in this. Representative Bundy, HB 415 in 2024 allowed those with an Idaho Enhanced Carry Permit to carry on school grounds. Why did just before the vote did you get up and leave? Do you have support for HB 415? Everyone else, how did you or would you vote on this House bill and why?
That's a very misleading question. That day, and you can talk to House leadership, I asked if that bill was going to be on the docket that day. And I was told no. I had a prearranged schedule over at the Lyndon Johnson room, and I was meeting with school district personnel, and I was meeting with Superintendent Critchfield. You can check our calendar, I'm on the calendar, and when I'm in the meeting, I get calls and they say, this bill is on the docket. Well, at that point, I couldn't get there. So for folks to think that there's a nefarious reason, if you check my voting history is it, you know how many bills I have missed in my 4 years? 1. Unfortunately, it was that bill. That's an important bill. We need to make sure that our schools are safe. We need to make sure we do it right. So I appreciate the question. I believe it was Mr. Firsch. Is that correct?
Yes.
I do appreciate the question because when you check when you know there are important bills on the docket, what should a legislator do? You should say, is it going to be heard? I was told no, and then apparently right before the floor session, there was a conversation between leadership and the bill sponsor, and they decided to run it first, and I was already out of the building and gone. I apologize. That's the way that sometimes the legislature goes. There are, you can look at it, my voting, unless your voting percentage is 100%, I have the highest voting percentage in the Idaho State House of Representatives.
Would you vote for it again?
Would I vote for it again?
That's a yes or no.
Could they just ask new questions?
Well, I think that's part of the question. It was part of the question.
Yes, I will vote to protect students, and I will vote to protect people, and I will vote to allow folks to have the right training and the right gun to have it on campus. Yes.
I would vote in favor of doing away with any soft target like gun-free zones, hospitals, schools, and the like. I remember in high school, all the boys had guns in their pickup trucks. They'd go hunting after school. We've all heard that story. A lot of us have experienced that. And we should do away with those gun-free zones. They are soft targets. 2, maybe 3 years ago, we even had a school shooting in Idaho, in Rigby of all places. It's a small community. It's a very good community, and they had a shooting over there. And so we are not immune in Idaho. And if we have armed teachers, not all of them have to be, or if we're able to carry weapons, concealed weapons wherever we are, well, we're not going to have those soft targets anymore. And so, like I said, we're not immune to that anymore. Our world is changing, and it's still changing rapidly. And so, yes, everybody should be able to carry a gun, whether it's on school, hospital, or whatever.
So, Representative Bundy is 100% correct. That was an issue of timing. What was going on in the background was the bill sponsor was meeting and negotiating with the Senate chairman of the committee that would have to hear the bill. And at that point in time, the Senate chairman was refusing to hear the bill, and we weren't going to move it. The speaker agreed that we weren't going to move that bill until those negotiations are over. And so that was the information that was relayed to Representative Bundy. He went on that information. Partway through the session, after he'd already left the building, the speaker called me. My responsibility is to run the bills, and we pulled it up. And so, and I voted for it, just in case you're curious. But that is what happened, is that initially the discussion was that we were going to hold it for one more legislative day because we wanted to make sure that it had a sure path, because we wanted it to move all the way to the governor's desk. That was the intention, was to get it all the way through, and we didn't want stoppage in the Senate. And that's part of the negotiation process that we continue to do day after day in the legislature. And what happened was that the bill sponsor and the speaker decided they were ready to go, and so it came up on the calendar. So that's what happened, but yes, I did support it.
Thank you. Yes, I would have voted for it. I'll vote for any bill that restores full Second Amendment rights. The right to keep and bear arms shall not being different.
Yay.
Thank you, I appreciate Representative Blankman's comments on that. So House Bill 415 passed the House. Where my office is in the West Wing, I'm in the chairman's suites. So you have to go past my office to go all the way down the hallway to all the chairman's offices. So I get to see and interact with a lot of people. And Representative Hill, the sponsor of 415, was dealing with Senator Guthrie, the chair of the Senate State Affairs Committee, very frequently. More of my colleagues were working, and the idea was get the bill across and then see if it needed to be amended. There were some issues with the bill. Remember that no school district is prohibited from allowing their students to carry. Some school districts do this, some don't. So this would have intercepted the local ability of the school board to say yes or no, and said you must, and then had different levels of training that were required, and there was serious dispute about the levels of training. So watching those negotiations accrue and the decision on whether or not 415 was going to make it was part of the process. The process, again, is examine the bill and hear feedback from those stakeholders who have to deal with it, who have to deal with it in the classroom every day, law enforcement professionals, school board professionals, and school administrators who had concerns about the implementation of the bill. Those concerns were heard. There were attempts to amend the bill. There were attempts to come up with another bill. It didn't get done. I would have voted to advance the legislation, but I would have also voted to send it to the amending order to correct some of those issues, to see what we could get accomplished. It turned out that that didn't work. There was another bill that was proposed, would have changed the law, and that one ultimately failed and didn't make it out of the committee.
We're getting to the end here, so yes, I was for the bill. I think we need to have people that are armed in schools. It's unfortunate, it should never be that way. Their kids are so unsafe in our country these days, but yes, police cannot be everywhere at once, especially in a spread out district, really anywhere. So yes, I would support that.
Okay, so we're gonna do our 1 minute final comments from each person running for office. So I think Matt, you answered the last question first, so Faye, I'll let you go ahead and start this. 1 minute.
Once again, I want to thank everybody, especially the chamber and the local newspaper for sponsoring us tonight. I think it's very, very important, even with what we've heard tonight, that our district needs to have balanced representation throughout the whole district. And myself in Valley County, Rob in Boise County, and Christy here in Elmore County can give you, the voters, that representation. Because we are very diverse, we are economically and culturally very different from one another, and so I hope to have your vote on May 21st. Thank you.
And I do want to thank the chamber. For those of you who don't know, they threw this together in a week, and it's impressive, and appreciate the opportunity, because we don't get that many opportunities to get out in front of people. So thanks for throwing it together, and thanks to all of you who on a short schedule made it out today. It's nice to see everybody, and I've seen some faces I haven't seen in quite a while, so that's been fun. I think that while representing a large district is a challenge, I've tried to do it to the best of my ability, and to balance the needs of Elmore County and Valley County and Boise County. But we're all working together because we're all rural counties, and we need a good voice for rural counties. We can't afford to let off the gas when it comes to our interests, because otherwise the Treasure Valley legislators will swallow us. And I think that that's the important thing to remember, and that's what I've always stood up for, is to make sure that that rural voice is heard and our input is taken so that we can work to our best benefit. And so I'm asking for your vote, and thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate y'all being here tonight. It's so good to see everybody here. It's so good to see engaged citizens. What I'd like to do with the minute that I have, I noticed that when we started, we didn't offer a prayer or a pledge to our flag. If it's okay, if we could do both, would you mind if we did that?
How about we do it after we're done, so you
Okay,
use your full
perfect. So in my minute, then what I'd like to do is I would like to thank our Father in heaven for having us all here tonight and getting us here safe. And I pray and ask him that he will take us all home safely when it's over. May God guide your decision when you cast your vote on May 21st. And may he keep us and bless us and hold us all in his hands. Amen.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank the Chamber for putting this together, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming here. It's so hard sometimes to see the complacency and see people who don't want to be involved, people who want to come. Whether you support me or not, you came to listen to what I had to say. You came to ask me questions. I'm happy to answer them. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I deal in an adversarial situation in court almost every single day. I deal adversarially when we do debate in the Senate. I enjoy trying to get at the right answer and come to the best answer that I possibly can. I think I'm pretty good at it. I think I can work with my colleagues and advance the best legislation we can get. And I'm here to look out for the interests of Elmore County and District 8. And I really would appreciate your vote on May 21st. Thank you.
Yeah, like I said, thank you everybody for coming, taking your time out of your night, and there's a million things we'll be doing out there, and you took some time to get to know the issues, get to know your candidates, and make a better informed decision. As you know, in Idaho, we don't hardly have general elections that are, too meaningful here. This race, the primary here, the Republican primary, May 21st, will determine the winner almost certainly of all the House seats and Senate seats, and pretty much any other seat here. So, thank you for your time. Really enjoy knowing you guys, and if you're going door to door, Kristen makes me text her when I get home at night because of my long drive back to Horseshoe Bend. And just want to say thanks for coming out, and I hope everybody vote on May 21st.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I'd like to tell you what a blessing it's been to be able to serve in the Idaho legislature. After I served 20 years flying jets for the Air Force, I didn't think that there was anything that I could do that would fill my soul the way protecting my country did. But then I got to be a school teacher, and I got to work with 17 and 18-year-olds. And let me tell you right now, working with 17 and 18-year-olds, when I make a decision, I am projecting their future. I'm projecting what they need, because they are hardworking, they are smart, and they are going to be great leaders of our communities, of our state, and our nation. So as blessed as I feel to have protected this nation for 20 years in combat aviation, I'm even more blessed to have been a school teacher, and everything that I do as a legislator, I do with them in mind. I do with their futures in mind, and I do with Idaho's futures in mind. So I ask for your vote, and I thank you for being here.
All right, so thank you for everybody coming tonight. I want to thank the Elks Lodge for hosting us, put this on. Swana for doing a great job, being a timekeeper, good job. Joy to do all the recordings and the ladies. John Rizal, Executive Director for the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for helping put this on in a week.